There's an ancient Buddhist secret that sounds too simple to be true. Stay silent, do nothing, and watch everything fall into place. Not because you've given up, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've finally understood what Buddhism has been teaching for thousands of years. Most of the time, your interference is the problem. Your constant speaking, your endless explaining, your desperate need to control and fix and manage. This is what keeps things broken. Think about the last time you tried to force a solution, pushed for an answer, demanded immediate resolution, explained yourself endlessly to someone who wouldn't listen. What happened? Did it work? Or did your trying make everything more complicated, more tangled, more impossible? Buddhism teaches that there's a wisdom in silence that surpasses all our clever words, a power in stillness that achieves what frantic action never could, a trust in natural timing that delivers results our forcing only prevents. When you stay silent, truly silent, not just with your mouth but with your mind, you create space, and in that space, something remarkable happens. Life organizes itself, problems resolve on their own, people come to their own realizations, solutions emerge from places you never expected, timing aligns perfectly without your management. It's like trying to help a butterfly emerge from its cocoon. If you interfere, if you cut the cocoon to help, you kill the butterfly. The struggle is necessary. Your interference, no matter how well intended, destroys the very process you're trying to support. But if you stay silent, if you trust the natural unfolding, if you simply watch, the butterfly emerges perfectly, exactly when it's meant to. This is not passivity. This is not giving up. This is understanding the difference between aligned action and desperate interference, between wise patience and controlling anxiety, between trusting life's intelligence and demanding it operate on your timeline. In this teaching, I'm going to share 7 Buddhist principles on why staying silent and trusting the process allows everything to fall into place naturally. These aren't just philosophical ideas. These are practical truths you can apply immediately to stop making your life harder than it needs to be. Let's discover what happens when you finally stop interfering with life's natural wisdom. The first Buddhist teaching is the hardest one to accept. Most of the time, your constant speaking and doing is not solving problems. It's creating them. You think you're helping. You think your words are clarifying. You think your actions are moving things forward. But Buddhism asks you to consider this. What if your involvement is actually the obstacle? What if the problem would resolve itself if you simply stepped back and stayed silent? This goes against everything you've been taught. Modern culture worships action. Doing something, anything, is seen as better than doing nothing. Speaking up is valued over staying quiet. Being proactive is praised, while patience is seen as weakness. But Buddhism has watched human nature for millennia, and it's noticed something crucial. People who constantly interfere in every situation often make things worse, not better. Their need to speak creates misunderstandings. Their rush to act disrupts natural timing. Their inability to wait prevents organic solutions from emerging. Think about a relationship conflict. Someone says something that hurts you. Your immediate instinct is to defend yourself, to explain, to make them understand, to correct their misperception. So you respond immediately with a long message explaining everything. What usually happens? They get defensive, they explain why their position is right. Now you are in a full argument, each explaining endlessly to someone who's not listening. The original small issue becomes a major conflict, all because neither person could stay silent long enough to let the heat die down. But imagine staying silent. You read their hurtful message and you feel the urge to respond, but instead you do nothing. You stay quiet, you wait, you let the emotions settle in both of you. What often happens? They realize on their own that they overreacted. They come back with an apology, or the issue simply fades because it wasn't that important, or time gives you perspective that allows a much wiser response later. The problem resolves because you didn't interfere with your immediate reaction. Buddhism teaches that most conflicts perpetuate not because of the original issue, but because of the interference loop. Person A says something, Person B reacts, Person A defends, Person B explains. Each interference creates more interference. Each word generates more words. Each action demands more action. The chain continues until someone has the wisdom to stay silent, to not react, to not explain, to not defend, to simply let it be. This doesn't mean you never address issues. It means you understand that immediate interference usually makes things worse. That silence creates the space for wisdom to emerge. That waiting allows both you and the other person to access clarity you couldn't reach in the heat of the moment. The same principle applies to every area of life. At work, the person who rushes to speak in every meeting often adds noise, not value. In parenting, the parent who constantly interferes prevents children from learning through natural consequences. In personal growth, the person who frantically seeks every solution prevents the internal wisdom from surfacing. Buddhism invites you to consider, what if less is more? What if silence serves you better than speech? What if watching and waiting achieves more than forcing and pushing? Try this today. The next time you feel the urge to interfere, to speak, to act, to fix, pause. Stay silent. Watch what happens when you don't add your interference to the situation. You might be amazed at how often things work out perfectly when you simply stop being the problem. The second Buddhist teaching reveals why staying silent isn't just about stopping interference. It's about allowing something deeper to emerge. When you're constantly speaking and doing, you operate from surface-level thinking, quick reactions, conditioned responses, habitual patterns. You say what you always say. You do what you always do. There's no space for anything new or wise to emerge. But when you stay silent, deeply silent, you create an opening. And into that opening flows a wisdom that your busy mind couldn't access. Buddhism calls this your true nature, your Buddha nature, the intelligence that exists beneath all the mental noise. Think about the moments in your life when you've had the deepest insights, when real clarity arrived, when you suddenly understood something you'd been struggling with. Did these moments happen during frantic activity, while you were explaining yourself to someone, in the middle of an argument? Or did they come in silence, in the shower, on a quiet walk, in the still moment before sleep, after you'd stopped trying to figure it out and simply sat with the question? Buddhism teaches that wisdom is always present. It's not something you create through effort. It's something you uncover when you remove the obstacles. And the biggest obstacle? The constant noise of your speaking, your doing, your interfering. When you stay silent and simply watch a situation, something shifts. You see things you couldn't see when you were busy managing everything. You notice patterns. You understand motivations. You perceive solutions that weren't visible when you were caught in the chaos of constant involvement. Imagine you're facing a difficult decision. The typical approach is to think about it constantly. Talk to everyone you know. Make lists of pros and cons. Analyze from every angle. Try to force clarity through mental effort. Buddhism suggests something different. Sit with the question, then stay silent. Don't force an answer. Don't keep picking at it like a wound. Just hold the question gently and let it be. Go about your life. Stay silent about it. What often happens? The answer arrives, not from your analyzing, not from your talking, but from somewhere deeper. You wake up one morning and you just know. The path becomes clear without effort. The decision makes itself. This is natural wisdom surfacing. It was always there, but your constant interference, your thinking, your talking, your forcing, kept it buried. When you created silence, you created the space for it to emerge. The same principle applies to relationships. When you stay silent, instead of constantly talking about the relationship, analyzing every interaction, explaining every feeling, something shifts. You start to feel what's true. You perceive what's actually happening versus what your stories say is happening. In work situations, the silent observer often sees the real dynamics that the constant talkers miss. They understand who has real power versus who just makes noise. They perceive the unspoken agreements and hidden agendas. This wisdom guides them to make better decisions than all the surface-level information could provide. Buddhism teaches that this natural wisdom is your birthright. It's not special or rare. It's your default state when you stop covering it with constant mental and verbal noise. Every human has access to it, but most people never experience it because they never create the silence necessary for it to emerge. Practice this starting today. Instead of immediately speaking when facing a situation, stay silent. Instead of frantically doing when confronting a problem, simply watch. Instead of forcing solutions, trust that wisdom will surface when you stop drowning it in noise. This is not passive. This is the most active practice you can engage in. You're actively choosing silence over noise, actively trusting deeper wisdom over surface reactions, actively watching life instead of constantly interfering with it. And in that watching, in that silence, everything you need to know becomes clear. Buddhism's third teaching is radical. The majority of problems you face will solve themselves if you simply stay silent and don't interfere. This challenges everything you believe about problem solving. You've been taught that problems require solutions, that you must actively work to resolve every issue, that doing nothing is irresponsible or lazy. But Buddhism has observed something your modern culture hasn't. Many problems are self-correcting systems. They have a natural resolution point. They would fix themselves if left alone. Your interference is what prevents this natural resolution and often makes the problem chronic instead of temporary. Think about a disagreement with a friend. They say something insensitive. You're hurt. The natural human impulse is to address it immediately, to let them know they hurt you, to explain why it was wrong, to demand an apology. But what if you stay silent? What if you simply let it be? Often, they realize on their own what they said. They feel bad about it. They reach out to apologize without you saying anything. The problem solves itself because you didn't interfere with the natural process of their own conscience working. But if you immediately confront them, they might get defensive, justify what they said. Now you're in a fight. The original small wound becomes a major conflict. Your interference turned a self-correcting problem into a chronic issue. Buddhism teaches this principle. Systems tend toward balance. Water finds its level. Tension releases naturally. Conflicts resolve organically, but only if you don't keep disturbing the process. Imagine a pond with ripples. If you keep throwing stones, the ripples never settle. But if you stop throwing stones and stay silent, the water naturally returns to stillness. Your interference is what maintains the chaos. The same is true with so many problems in life. At work, a misunderstanding between colleagues will often resolve as people calm down and gain perspective. But the person who keeps bringing it up, explaining, defending, justifying, they prevent the natural resolution. In parenting, children will often learn from natural consequences if parents stay silent. But the parent who constantly intervenes, explains, lectures, protects from every discomfort, they prevent the natural learning process. In personal relationships, many issues are temporary emotional weather. They would pass like a storm if left alone. But the person who must discuss every feeling, analyze every interaction, process every emotion out loud, they prevent the natural settling that silence allows. This doesn't mean you ignore everything. Buddhism isn't teaching avoidance, it's teaching discernment. Learning to recognize which problems need active addressing and which need silence and time. Most problems fall into the second category. They're temporary, they're self-correcting. They need space, not interference. Time, not management. Silence, not explanation. The key is developing patience, the ability to sit with a problem and not immediately rush to fix it, to trust that time and silence work miracles that force and words cannot. Practice this discernment. The next time a problem arises, before jumping into action, ask yourself, what if I do nothing? What if I stay silent? What would happen if I trusted this to resolve naturally? You'll be surprised how often the answer is, it resolves beautifully, better than any forced solution you could have created. Buddhism calls this Wu Wei, effortless action. Not doing nothing, but doing only what's necessary and allowing everything else to unfold naturally. Staying silent when silence serves. Speaking only when speech truly adds value. Master this, and you'll watch problems fall into place with less effort than you ever thought possible. The fourth Buddhist teaching is practical wisdom. Staying silent protects you from the very real danger of making situations worse through ill-timed words or actions. You've experienced this. You've said something in anger that damaged a relationship. You've acted impulsively and regretted it. You've explained yourself when silence would have served you better. Looking back, you can see clearly your interference made things worse, not better. Buddhism teaches that silence is a shield. When you don't know what to say, when emotions are high, when the situation is unclear, silence protects you from adding damage to an already difficult situation. Think about receiving criticism or a harsh message. Your immediate response is usually defensive. You want to explain why they're wrong, to justify yourself, to make them understand your perspective. So you fire back a response immediately. What usually happens? You say things you regret. Your defensive tone escalates the situation. Now, instead of one problem, you have multiple problems. The original issue, plus all the damage from your reactive response. But what if you stayed silent? What if you read the criticism, felt all the feelings, but said nothing? You wait. You let yourself calm down. you gain perspective, and then hours or days later, you respond with wisdom instead of reaction, or you realize no response is needed at all. The silence itself was the perfect response. Buddhism recognizes that most of our words and actions come from emotional reactivity, not wisdom. We speak to relieve our own discomfort. We act to manage our anxiety. We explain to protect our ego. These motivations rarely lead to helpful outcomes. Silence interrupts this reactive pattern. It creates a pause. And in that pause, you have the opportunity to choose wisdom over reaction. Consider professional situations. Someone challenges you in a meeting. Your instinct is to defend immediately, to prove them wrong, to protect your reputation. But if you speak from that reactive place, you might come across as defensive or insecure. You might say something you regret. You might damage professional relationships. But if you stay silent, if you simply acknowledge their point and say nothing more, you often appear more confident, more secure, more wise. Your silence communicates strength, while your defensive explanation would have communicated weakness. In personal relationships, the same principle applies. When your partner says something hurtful, immediate retaliation might feel satisfying in the moment, but it damages the relationship. Silence allows you to respond from love instead of hurt, from understanding instead of defense. Buddhism also teaches that silence protects you from committing to things you shouldn't commit to. How many times have you agreed to something in the moment because you didn't want to say no? You didn't want awkwardness or conflict, so you said yes when you should have stayed silent or said no? If you develop the practice of silence, you create space to consider before committing, to feel into whether something is actually aligned for you, to check in with your truth before responding with an automatic yes. Silence gives you time to gain clarity, time to let emotions settle, time to access wisdom, time to see the situation more completely, and time often reveals that the perfect response is continued silence. Practice this protection today. Before responding to anything challenging, stay silent, count to 10, or better yet, wait hours or even days if possible. Let yourself feel everything without immediately acting on those feelings. You'll discover that silence protects you from so much unnecessary damage. That waiting reveals wise responses your reactivity would never access. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. This is not cowardice. This is wisdom, and it allows everything to fall into place without your interference making it worse. Buddhism's fifth teaching on silence is about trust. When you stay silent and watch, you discover that life has its own perfect timing that your forcing only disrupts. You want things now. You want answers immediately. You want problems solved today. You want people to change right away. This impatience drives you to push, to speak, to act, to force. You try to make things happen on your timeline. But Buddhism teaches that everything has its season, its right moment, its perfect timing. And that timing is rarely the same as your preferred schedule. Think about trying to make someone understand something before they're ready. You explain brilliantly. You use perfect logic. You present every fact, but they don't get it. They're not ready. No amount of your speaking will create readiness that doesn't exist. But if you stay silent, if you trust their timing instead of forcing yours, often they come to the understanding on their own, exactly when they're ready. Your silence allowed the natural timing to work. This is like trying to force a flower to bloom. You can't. It blooms when the conditions are right. When its internal timing aligns with external conditions, your interference doesn't help. Your forcing might actually damage it. Buddhism calls this understanding the Tao, the natural way of things. Everything unfolds according to its own nature and timing. The seed becomes the tree. The caterpillar becomes the butterfly. The difficult situation becomes the teaching, but all in their own time, not yours. When you stay silent and simply watch, you begin to see this natural timing at work. You notice that opportunities appear exactly when you're ready for them, that solutions emerge precisely when the conditions are right, that people change when the moment of ripeness arrives, not when you demand it. This requires profound trust that life knows what it's doing, that there's an intelligence operating that you can't always see or understand, that your limited perspective doesn't give you access to the bigger picture that's unfolding. Imagine you're waiting for a job offer. You interviewed well, but there's no response. Your impulse is to follow up, to push, to try to make it happen. You send emails, you call, you create pressure. What often happens? You come across as desperate, or you push when they're still processing other candidates. Your forcing disrupts their natural decision-making timeline. Sometimes you actually lose opportunities because you couldn't trust the timing. But what if you stayed silent? What if you did your part, the interview, and then trusted the timing? If it's right, it will happen when it's meant to. If it's not right, your forcing won't make it right. Your silence allows their natural process to unfold. This doesn't mean you never take action. It means you take aligned action and then release the timeline. You plant the seed and trust the seasons. You do your part and let life do its part. In relationships, this wisdom is crucial. You cannot force someone to love you on your timeline. You cannot demand they be ready when you're ready. You cannot rush someone's healing or growth or awakening. But when you stay silent, when you stop pushing, when you trust their timing and your timing to align naturally if they're meant to, you create space for genuine connection rather than forced obligation. Buddhism teaches that when you align with natural timing instead of fighting it, everything becomes easier. Things fall into place not because you forced them, but because you stopped interfering with their natural unfolding. Practice trusting timing today. Release the timeline on something you've been pushing. Stay silent instead of following up. Watch instead of forcing. Trust instead of controlling. You might discover that life's timing is actually more perfect than yours ever was. Buddhism's sixth teaching might sound mystical, but it's deeply practical. Staying silent creates empty space, and it's in empty space that unexpected solutions and so-called miracles can appear. When you fill every moment with speaking, doing, planning, managing, and controlling, you leave no room for anything unexpected to enter. Life's intelligence, the universe's creativity, the natural wisdom of situations, they cannot deliver surprising solutions when you've packed every space with your own agenda. But when you stay silent, when you create emptiness through non-interference, suddenly there's room. Room for opportunities you never imagined, for solutions from unexpected sources, for help you never thought to ask for. Think about trying to solve a problem through constant effort. You analyze it from every angle, you talk to everyone, you try solution after solution. You fill every space with your attempts to fix it, but nothing works. The harder you try, the more stuck you get. Then, exhausted, you give up. You stay silent. You stop trying. You create empty space where there was frantic effort. And that's often when the solution appears. Someone randomly mentions something that clicks. You overhear a conversation that gives you the answer. An opportunity presents itself from nowhere. The very thing you needed arrives, but only after you stopped filling all the space with your forcing. Buddhism teaches that this isn't coincidence. This is how life works. The forcing blocks. The silence allows. Your interference occupies the space where grace wants to enter. It's like trying to fill a cup that's already full. If your hands are full of your own solutions, there's nowhere for better solutions to land. But when you put down what you're holding, when you stay silent and create emptiness, your hands are free to receive what life wants to give you. This happens in relationships constantly. You're trying to force someone to understand you, explaining endlessly, repeating yourself, filling all the space with your words. They're not hearing you because there's no room. Your words are blocking what you most want them to receive. But when you stop speaking, when you create silence, sometimes they hear what you've been trying to say all along, not because you said it better, but because the silence allowed your earlier words to finally land. Or in careers, you're pushing for a specific opportunity, chasing one path relentlessly. Your effort fills all your energy and attention. But when you release that specific outcome, when you stay silent about your agenda, different opportunities appear, better ones you couldn't have imagined when you were too busy forcing your preferred path. Buddhism calls this hu wei again, effortless action, doing without forcing, creating through allowing, solving through releasing. The modern mind struggles with this because it sounds passive, but it's actually the opposite. It takes tremendous active awareness to stay silent when every instinct screams to speak, to watch when every fiber wants to interfere, to trust when everything in you wants to control. This is advanced spiritual practice, choosing emptiness over fullness, silence over noise, watching over forcing, trusting over controlling. Practice this today. Pick one situation where you've been trying hard to make something happen, where your constant effort hasn't worked, where your interference has only created more struggle. Now stop, stay silent, create empty space. Stop filling every moment with your agenda, your words, your actions. Just watch, just wait, just trust. You might be amazed at what arrives when you finally stop blocking it with your interference. This is where the so-called miracles happen, not through your forcing, but through your allowing, not through your noise, but through your silence, not through your interference, but through your trust that life knows what it's doing. The seventh and final Buddhist teaching brings it all together. When you achieve true silence, not just external quietness, but internal stillness, you gain access to a clarity that shows you the perfect path forward. This is the ultimate gift of staying silent and watching. Your mind becomes so quiet, so still, so free from the noise of constant thinking and speaking and doing that you can finally see clearly. And when you see clearly, the right action becomes obvious. Most of the time, you can't see the perfect path because your mind is too noisy. It's full of fears, doubts, stories, judgments, preferences, aversions. This mental noise creates a fog. You're trying to navigate through life while barely able to see 3 feet in front of you. But when you practice silence deeply, when you quiet not just your mouth but your mind, the fog lifts. Suddenly you can see. The path that was always there becomes visible. The next step reveals itself clearly. Buddhism teaches that this clarity is your natural state. You're not creating it through effort. You're uncovering it by removing the obstacles. And the biggest obstacle is mental and verbal noise. Think about facing a difficult decision while your mind is full of chatter. What will people think? What if I'm wrong? But what about this? And what about that? The noise is overwhelming. You can't hear your own wisdom through all the static. But if you stay silent, truly silent, and let the mental noise settle, something emerges. A knowing, a clarity, a sense of rightness about one path over another. This isn't logical analysis. It's deeper wisdom speaking through the silence. This silent knowing has guided human beings for millennia. Before modern life filled our minds with constant noise, people regularly accessed this wisdom. They would sit in silence and know the right time to plant, the right place to hunt, the right person to trust. Not through thinking, through silent knowing. You still have access to this, but you must create the silence for it to emerge. In relationships, this silent clarity shows you who genuinely cares versus who just says the right words. When your mind is quiet, you can feel the truth beneath the surface. You know who to trust and who to keep at distance, not through analysis, but through clear perception. In work, silent clarity reveals which opportunities align with your path and which are distractions. When you're not clouded by ego's need for status or fear's worry about security, you can see which door to walk through. In personal growth, silent clarity shows you what you actually need versus what you think you should want. It cuts through all the conditioning and cultural programming to reveal your authentic path. This is why Buddhism places such emphasis on meditation. It's training for accessing this silent clarity. You practice staying silent with your mind while sitting on a cushion so you can access silent clarity while navigating life. But you don't need to be a monk to develop this. You just need to practice silence throughout your day in small moments. Instead of immediately reacting, pause in silence. Instead of filling every quiet moment with noise, stay present in the silence. Instead of constantly thinking, let your mind rest. Over time, this silent clarity becomes more accessible. You start to trust it. You learn to recognize when it's speaking versus when ego or fear is speaking. You develop the discernment to know which inner voice to follow. And here's the beautiful thing. When you follow the guidance of silent clarity, everything really does fall into place. Not because you forced it, not because you figured it out, not because you controlled every variable, but because you aligned with the deepest wisdom available to you. The wisdom that knows things your thinking mind cannot access. This is the ultimate teaching on staying silent and watching everything fall into place. The silence isn't just external, it's internal. And when you achieve that profound internal silence, you don't need to force anything. The path reveals itself. The next step becomes clear. The right action emerges naturally. All you have to do is stay silent enough to see it. Let me bring together these 7 Buddhist teachings on staying silent and watching everything fall into place. First, understand that your constant interference is often the actual problem. Your speaking and doing frequently makes situations worse, not better. Second, silence allows natural wisdom to surface. When you stop filling all the space with noise, deeper intelligence emerges. Third, most problems solve themselves when you don't interfere. Life is a self-correcting system if you stop disrupting it. Fourth, silence protects you from making things worse. It shields you from reactive words and impulsive actions you'd regret. Fifth, trust the natural timing of things. Life unfolds according to its own perfect schedule, not yours. Sixth, silence creates space for miracles. When you stop filling every space with your agenda, unexpected solutions can appear. And seventh, the silent mind sees the perfect path. True clarity emerges only when mental noise settles. These aren't passive teachings. This is some of the most active, challenging practice you can engage in. Staying silent when everything in you wants to speak. Watching when every instinct wants to interfere. Trusting when all your conditioning demands control. But this is the path Buddhism offers, not the path of forcing and managing and controlling, but the path of wisdom and trust and allowing, not the path of constant noise, but the path of sacred silence. And in that silence, you discover what you've been seeking all along. Things work out, not because you made them work out, but because you stopped preventing them from working out. Problems resolve, not because you solved them, but because you stopped being the obstacle to their natural resolution. Life flows, not because you controlled it, but because you finally stopped interfering with its natural intelligence. So today, practice this ancient wisdom. Stay silent, watch, trust, allow. Stop interfering, stop forcing, stop filling every space with your noise, and watch with wonder as everything falls into place. If this teaching served you, share it with someone who's exhausted from trying to control everything. And let me know in the comments, what happened when you stopped interfering and simply stayed silent? Thank you for being here. May you discover the profound peace and perfect outcomes that wait in silence.